It's a blessed time of worship. I needed that. I love all those reminders that we can have peace and fear doesn't have to rule, even with so much chaos going on. I really like that song, Peace Be Still, because I love that line about dancing in the deep. I love that image. I like to think, that's cool. I really want to be that person that steps out onto the sea with faith and not just stays above the surface and walking on the water with Jesus, but dancing. That's really cool. It also almost never ever happens for me. I'm just honest. Usually in situations where it requires a lot of faith for me to stay above the surface, I'm not dancing. I'm not real happy to be there, if I'm honest. We look at Peter in that situation because that's taken from Peter getting out of the boat and walking on the water. And we tend to do a yo-yo of extremes with him. We either act like he is, second only to Jesus because he got out of the boat. Look at that great faith. And, that's not entirely horrible because it was pretty amazing. I'll be honest. I probably would have been one of the 11 who stayed in the boat. I mean, we like to think, there's Jesus, but just because I see God do something that only God can do, it usually doesn't make me think, I can do that. But it wasn't like Peter saw Jesus and jumped out of the boat and ran to him either. See, we go a little too far with that. First off, he said, Lord, if that's you, tell me to come, and I'll come. And then he still waited for Jesus to say, yeah, come on. So he didn't just jump out of the boat in faith. Then we go to the other extreme, because Peter, shame on him. He took his eyes off Jesus and began to sink. So, 5 seconds ago, he had more faith than any of us. 5 seconds later, we're ridiculing him for losing his faith. Really? Yeah. We remember that line, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And we hear it in a disappointed voice. And we see some disappointment in Jesus, and we act like Peter got in trouble for doubting, for questioning things, for losing the level of faith that he had, but he didn't get in trouble. That wasn't a condescending voice. That wasn't a shame on you voice. If you look at that passage of Scripture in Matthew chapter 14, what you will see is a couple of things. One is when Peter began to sink and cried out to Jesus, that's not when the line, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" comes. There's something in between there. And what is between there is that word immediately. Immediately, Jesus reached out and saved him. Immediately, Jesus reached out to take his hand. That's not, you should have had faith, so good luck. It's not that God will abandon us if we have some question. If we get scared, if we get afraid. He didn't abandon him at all. Immediately, he rescued him. That's good to know. That's really wonderful to know. Because there is something that Peter did that I do. I don't necessarily ever be the one who's like, "Hey, I think that looks cool. Let me out of the boat." But there is something. It said when Peter saw the wind, he became afraid. You realize that's ridiculous, right? We can't see the wind. Peter didn't see the wind. He thought he saw the wind. I'm not saying the Bible is inaccurate. I'm saying what Peter saw was the result of the wind. He saw the circumstances around him, but he didn't see the air moving. He may have seen some clouds moving. He saw the waves going crazy, whatever, the boat, but he didn't actually see the wind. He saw his situation and his circumstances, the impossibility of where he was. And his magic magnifying mind saw the wind. And he became afraid. And I do that. That I do. My magic magnifying mind can take things from my past and compare them in such a way that where logic and reason go, those are two totally separate situations and have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And the little part in my brain that loves to produce fear says, no, it's exactly the same and you're going to die. My magic magnifying mind can take real possible situations that are scary and really blow them up. And it can take impossible things and just really shut down. And I see the wind. But Jesus wasn't affected by the wind. And when he needed to, he said a word, peace, be still, and the wind would stop. See, he's not mad at us when we're one of the 11 getting on the boat. It's not me staying on the boat. Realize he didn't get onto them for not coming out. And he's not mad at us when we step out in faith and then get scared and need help. The truth of the matter is, if the very moment that Peter became afraid, if he'd have reached out his hand and taken Jesus' hand at that moment, he may have even stayed afraid and they might have been able to walk like father and son, or big brother and little brother, hand in hand across the waves, even with Peter being afraid. We don't need to get so, hey, I can do this. We need to remember that we need Jesus. I can't walk on water. You can't walk on water. Peter couldn't walk on water. Jesus could. And because Jesus could, Peter had a moment of being able to do that. It's called grace. But when we step out and we get scared and we worry that, okay, now God's mad at me and he's not going to help me, all we hear in our heads is, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? We forget that before Jesus ever said anything to remind him, I have never failed you. You saw me on the water. You saw yourself on the water. You should have trusted me. Before he said anything like that, immediately he reached out and saved him. This is not a God who wants you to step out in faith, and if you waver a little bit, he's not going to help you. He wrapped himself in flesh, walked straight to that cross, and he took our beatings, our shame, our sin, our guilt, our nails, and he bled his blood so we could have life. And he didn't do that so that we could drown if we waver a little bit because of fear. What he did was say, my peace will be with you. My comfort will be with you, because since I am no longer physically here, the Comforter can come. that your hope is eternal, that your life is eternal regardless of these situations. So because of what he did on that cross, we can trust that he loves us. No matter how much the wind is blowing or what our magic magnifying mind does with the circumstances and signs around us. We take our eyes and put them on Jesus. The wind can't shake us. When we take our eyes off Jesus, we falter. But even then, immediately, Lord, help me. And immediately, we reach out, he reaches out. He reached first. And he stretched out his arms and he died on our behalf. You can trust his love. He overcame death. He can overcome the storms in our lives. We can trust that too. So we just need to look back at the one who created the sun and the moon and the stars and you and me and everything else. And be quick to turn our eyes back to him.